So as I said, this lesson is a very common one at church weddings, particularly high church weddings, because it does capture the miracle of water into wine as it's lived out in the lives of people. And when you think about a marriage that becomes good, because marriages all start out the same way, and some turn out good and others don't work for whatever reason. Taking away all my parishioners? Where are they going?
They're downstairs with Ben and Francis.
Congregationalism. I say one thing. So I suppose we're going to have coffee hour now too?
Yes.
Yep, we're doing that too. So this is not at all what we do on Saturday nights. It's morphing. But to return to this miracle of water into wine. When people get together and fall in love, they're two strangers and they have this desire to love one another, which is the same desire as God's desire for all of us, to love one another. And through the act of marriage and through trying to be married, when it works, they become one heart, beating together. And this is the miracle of water turning into wine. Because beforehand, you just have these two people. But then later, you have this one couple. And this is particularly true if people make it through the long course, where they grow together, and you see how they've become this one organism. On this day, when we remember Martin Luther King, his life is another story of water into wine. Because from 50 years vantage point, most of us don't remember how it actually was being Martin Luther King. He was only in his mid-20s when he started at the Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. Just a young boy. Hard to imagine. And we also, in retrospect, forget how dangerous it was what those guys were doing. The history of violence and terror, the fact that people were bombed, his own house was bombed, there were lynchings, and people like myself, white, liberal pastors up in the north, really didn't want to get engaged with the whole thing. It was just too dangerous. It would make people angry that you were raising hell. Our pastor here at this church at that time, Dean Clark, got into a lot of trouble because he went to Selma to march with King. And in retrospect, we say, oh, what a great guy Dean Clark was. But at the time, people saw it as him making trouble and raising issues that people didn't want to talk about. And the fact that King was able to achieve as much as he did as a seminarian coming out of Boston University in the most dangerous city in America for black people. And it all started by walking rather than taking the bus. They walked and they carpooled for weeks and months until the boycott broke. Now, things have turned again in American history, and it seems like a much more polarized time between blacks and white people. There are more hate crimes going on. But King himself would say that the arc of justice is always bending towards the good. And we can see this water and wine miracle in so many other places in our world. In the women's movement, where when my great-grandmother came to America, she wasn't even recorded because she was married to my grandfather, so she wasn't a citizen. And now we have women running for president of the United States. Or in the gay rights movement, where people were forced to change who they were and pretend they weren't who they are, and now people are able to live their lives as they are. The same miracle happens in friendship, where you meet someone, it's just a random person, and somehow the chemistry is right, you want friendship, you want that love, and it becomes this special relationship, as opposed to all the other relationships of acquaintance and camaraderie that we have in our lives. And finally, there are the times in our lives where we put our mind to a task, like King, but maybe on a smaller basis, where our heart desires that we make peace, that we create love or justice, or freeing the captives, or caring for the brokenhearted, or feeding the hungry, or clothing the naked. And other people come our way. And together, our purposes align with God's purposes. And this water turns into wine, and a miracle happens. So I say these things to you so that you know that while it might have happened in Cana of Galilee, it happens in our lives if we just notice, and it can happen in our lives if that's what we want to have happen. If we want to be people of transformation, moving from just a bunch of people where the wine had given out and the party was over to the best wine coming out. So I would invite all of you